I feel pretty certain that most folks watching this grew up with the phrase, be careful about cutting your nose off to spite your face. And where that cliche has evolved over the last, 6 or 7 decades is now kind of in the vernacular of today's world and Gen Z. What we like to do is a hashtag that's FAFO, F around and find out. We also, in the political terms of cutting your nose off to spite your face, in this breaking story, it's voting against your own interests. And since Donald Trump came down the escalator in 2015, many people have been trying to express, beg, scream to many of the Republican voters in this country who may be a little more centric right, and even on many, many levels, what helped Trump win this past time especially, are the independents voting right and somehow managing to cut off their own nose to spite their face. And there's nothing more true than when it comes to the heartland of this country and what our farmers are going through, a massive percentage of which are Republican voters. I'm going to show you that story in just a few seconds. Take a quick listen to this.
This is Clayton, North Carolina. We are on a small family farm, and we're here to talk to a group of farmers, all of whom voted for Trump, about the global economic chaos President Trump has just unleashed in his tariff war. These are the people who sit right at the crosshairs of that chaos, and they also happen to be people who brought this president into office.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. It's just the direction. You don't know which direction, what the president's really thinking at this time.
I'd say a lot of our decisions really are made in January and February. So kind of we've already gone down a path and we're kind of committed right now. So we have to just pray and hope that everything works well, because we're kind of locked in. There's only so many things you can do. And at this point, it's late in the game for farmers.
And just to add to that, keep in mind that any farmer, anyone who lives in these areas, and I know people who do, they all know that they have undocumented workers working for them, yet they vote for an administration that could come by and scoop them up any day, except for the fact that Trump's really hard-lined about that until he realizes, oh, we actually need those undocumented workers to keep on working, so we actually have lettuce for my constituents to buy, or the Americans to buy. So he's a hypocrite in one area, scoops everyone else off the street without due process, and yet, even though it's a possibility, farmers seem to manage to vote against their best interests. Well, guess what? F around and find out in this breaking story. Take a listen.
Crisis. U.S. farm exports collapse to pandemic-era levels as Trump's tariffs ramp up. The U.S. farming sector is on the brink of crisis as President Donald Trump's trade war implodes America's ability to ship crops abroad, reported CNBC on Tuesday morning. This follows warnings from lawmakers in Trump's own party who represent agricultural areas, fearing the negative impact on the mounting taxes and retaliatory taxes from other countries. What began as a rapid drop in U.S. imports, as shippers cut orders from manufacturing partners around the world, has now extended into a nationwide export slump, with the U.S. agricultural sector and top farm products, including soybeans, corn, and beef, taking the hardest hit, said the report. The latest trade data shows that a slide in U.S. exports to the world, and China in particular, that began in January now extends to most U.S. ports, according to Trade Tracker Vision, which analyzed U.S. export container bookings for the 5-week period before President Donald Trump's tariffs began, and the 5 weeks after the tariffs took effect. The numbers, per the report, are some of the worst that have been seen since the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted supply chains in 2020. We haven't seen anything like this since the disruptions of summer 2020, Vision's CEO Kyle Henderson told CNBC. That means goods expected to arrive in the next 6 to 8 weeks simply won't. With tariffs driving costs higher, small businesses are pausing orders. Products that once moved reliably are now twice as expensive, forcing importers into tough decisions. Even before these numbers, the report noted, the agricultural industry has been warning of a crisis, and ports data is showing more evidence of lack of ability to move product out to global markets. Some of the worst-hit areas are Pacific Northwest ports like Portland and Tacoma, which specialize in shipping U.S. crops to Asia. the Port of Portland has already seen a 51% drop in exports. One of the core rationales for Trump enacting the tariffs in the first place was his paranoia over trade deficits, or countries sending more imports to the U.S. than they take in exports. Economists have long agreed trade deficits aren't an inherently bad thing, but Trump and his advisors are convinced they are an indicator of unfair foreign trade practices and explicitly set their tariffs based on the size of each country's trade deficit.
I do not profess to be an economist in any way, shape, form, or fashion. However, I do know, as I think many of us do, that the concept of a long, slow domino fall is kind of what occurs to our supply chains. And if a lot of Americans were paying attention during COVID, we witnessed this. When we shut the country down on March 15th, 2020, it wasn't overnight that things didn't get here. But because of the national emergency for public health safety, there was a mad rush immediately on stores and shelves and retail. Right now, we do not have that, and so people aren't rushing to go stock up. But what occurred when that happened was it took a little while for all the shipping stuff to come to a halt. But when it did, we didn't have anything. This is what caused the government to dump a couple of $1 trillion into the economy. However, right now, it's a slow domino. It's the threat of tariffs, not the threat of tariffs, the threat of tariffs, not the... And now slowly, farmers are facing a slow bleed, and it will take a long time for it to return. And some of them won't be able to hold out. And most all of them, not all, most all of them voted for Donald Trump. I'm not proud of saying just desserts. I don't want to see anybody go out of business who's worked hard for perhaps several generations. But this is what happens when you don't bother to be educated or you listen to people who claim to do their own research. This is what happens when you vote for someone who inherently wants you to believe he cares about you. But Donald J. Trump, in his entire lifetime, has never cared about anybody but himself. You guys stay frosty.